Hi, this is Raj from Sportscars. In this video I'm going to talk specifically about the 95B.2 Macan Turbo because I think these are an incredibly epic model. It's the flagship of the Macan range of this era. For me, the Turbo in any model range, particularly in the 911s, was always seen as the road-going flagship car. And in the Macan era of 95B.2, I think it is the same as well. Here I've got a same era GTS, which there are similarities. They have the same engine. This has the RS4 engine, just like, well, a version of the Audi RS4 engine. They share the same engine with the Audi RS4. So a slightly different tune though. So they're both twin turbo. That one has 380 horsepower, 384 foot-pounds of torque. This one has 440 horsepower and 404 foot-pounds of torque. The figures don't say a lot about how differently they drive, and that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to drive the Turbo and actually go through exactly how it feels behind the wheel compared to the Macan GTS, which is also an epic car. This one is actually very, very highly spec'd and has a lot of similarities with this Turbo, but there are some differences too, particularly in the performance side. And in all honesty, if you're buying a Turbo, no matter what kind of Porsche, if it's got the Turbo name in it, I think you're buying it for performance, how it feels behind the wheel, and you want the absolute best for the road. So let's take it for a drive. Okay, here I am in the driver's seat of the lovely 95B.2 Macan Turbo. This car is a special order crayon, which the paintwork is, I think, really very, very striking and very different to all the other colours in the palette. We've had this a couple of months and I'm a bit surprised it's still here, but we've had a few part exchange inquiries that haven't quite worked out, and yeah, finance as well. But nevertheless, it is still here, so I thought I'd take it for another drive and show you exactly why I think they're so special. I do sincerely believe these are the ultimate Macan. The GTS has a little bit less power. They were obviously a little bit cheaper, but this car is really a cut above in terms of how it performs. Now, I've literally just, it's only 4.5 degrees, so it's very cold this morning, so I'm sort of driving a little bit gingerly, but you don't really need to because of that four-wheel drive system in these. It is so intuitive, just like in the systems they developed for the road-going sports cars. The 911, very, very sure-footed if you've got the four-wheel drive version. You don't have to change any settings, and it's the same with this one, even though you've got a mode switch, because this one's got the sport chrono. So you've got the normal mode, sport plus, and then individual, and then you've also got dynamic response. So if you press the button in the middle of the mode switch, which is on the steering wheel on these 95B.2s, rather than having the switches here, they move them to the steering wheel. And if you change that, if you press that middle button, it gives you 20 seconds of basically the ultimate performance. So if you're about to do an overtake, that's the easiest way of getting it in the right mode. Now, I've just got it in sport, and I've also turned up the switchable sports exhaust, so it is already sounding great, but as it warms up, it will actually sound even better as well. The tune of the engine is also very docile when you want it to be, so it's not very highly strung at all. Some people might be worried, it's got over 400 horsepower, but really the way that it brings in the power is just so smooth and natural. You don't feel like it's gonna drive you off the road at every opportunity. I mean, the roads, as I said, are very cold and slippy, but I don't feel any issues with how it's riding, how it's putting down power. And you can just hear it cackling and popping, even without the roof open. This has got the optional pano roof, the panoramic sunroof, which is glass and the front half opens, or you can have it on a tilt. I think I'll do that actually, just to let a bit of the sound of the exhaust in. And actually, because it's got the turbos and because it is a 3 litre, it actually warms up quite quickly. So it's already up, oil temperature wise I'm talking about, not just coolant. The oil temperature is already at 70 degrees, so it does warm up quickly, even without spirited driving. Ideally with turbos, you have to be, all turbocharged cars, it's always best to be, my advice is to start them up and get driving as soon as possible. Don't just sit there on the driveway warming it up at idle. Get driving, but keep it under 2.5 or 3,000 revs at the most, just so it quickly circulates that oil, quickly heats up the block, so that there's no chance, and also warms up the turbos as well, so you've got no chance of premature wear caused by thrashing it cold, or equally unevenly heating it through it just sitting there idling. If you sit it there idling, it takes a lot longer to heat up than if you've got it at just above 2,000 RPM. So don't thrash it, but just, I would say, just drive it conservatively until you know it's up to temperature. But the thing I wanted to describe actually is how this differs from the rest of the range. So the nearest competitor in the Macan range is the GTS, and actually, funnily enough, a year after this car, or 2 years after this car was produced, they decided to basically combine the engine from this car, so the 440 brake-ish, it has a little bit more, with all the GTS package into one model. So they sort of basically discontinued the turbo. So up until this point, you had the distinction between the GTS and the turbo, which makes it a bit confusing if you're looking to buy one of these cars. Is why isn't there one that's like a 2023 or 2022? And that's because they basically amalgamated the GTS with the turbo in the range, in the UK anyway. I'm not sure about in other countries, but you essentially got all of the two combined. But in this particular sort of model year, you had the GTS, and then you had the Flagship turbo on top, and it was sort of, I think, spec'd more for the luxury and the high performance. So rather than having Alcantara and leather, you got full leather I guess you were guided to spec it. So this has got full extended leather across the dash. It's got the full leather seats. It's got embossed headrest front and back. But yeah, of course, you could customize everything. So you could have half Alcantara, half leather, with contrast stitching. This car's been spec'd like very, very nicely in here with the piano black trims. It's got the Bose system as well, which sounds really great as well. And then it's got the leather multifunction steering wheel, which again is, feels very luxury. Just like the rest of the interior here. And this era, the 95B.2, still has buttons in this area here, so it's quite nice. You've got actual tactile buttons to change the control, so change the suspension settings. I normally run this in Sport, but it has got Comfort and Sport Plus, because this car's equipped with the standard dampers, not the standard dampers, but the PASM dampers, so the Porsche Active Suspension Management dampers. There was another level which was air suspension, so you actually got basically airbags at each corner, and that allowed you also to do height adjustment as well as change the stiffness and the suppleness of the ride. I quite like this system because in the long term, it's going to be a simpler system to maintain. So say if you need to replace a new damper, it's a lot cheaper than replacing an airbag on an air suspension car. If that springs a slight leak somewhere, it might be a bit tricky to find. So I do like the switchable sport suspension the best with the dampers rather than the sort of airbag system. But then other people say that the air suspension is also very good. It is a very durable system, and it has a slightly, I think, even more comfortable ride in comfort. And you've got the added benefit of having height adjustment as well, just like you would on a top of the range Range Rover and things. But in terms of Porsche, this is every bit as adequate and actually very enjoyable to drive with the switchable sports suspension, which are sort of more traditional dampers rather than the airbag system. But the thing I really love about the Turbo and how it differs from the GTS is actually in that engine tune. So even though the headline figures are, it's about 60 horsepower, which in a car this big shouldn't make a huge amount of difference. It's only 0.3 seconds quicker to 60, so 4.3 versus 4.6. It's the way it delivers the power that makes a big difference. That 20 extra foot-pounds of torque helps, but also it's the surge of power allows you to actually drive it more effortlessly, in terms of when you want to go fast, you don't have to wring its neck. It will just take off, and it's a very addictive feeling when you drive this car and feel it take off. It's extremely comfortable, but yet also you feel the power, the surge coming through, and it's actually a great car for passengers as well, because it doesn't sort of suddenly sort of make you slam back like, say, an electric car potentially would, like a Tesla or something. But it's sort of natural feeling high performance that you get. You can't really replicate with anything other than a combustion engine, in my opinion. I actually don't like the slingshot effect that you get with an electric car. I find it too aggressive, in terms of it's not an enjoyable experience when you're a passenger in a electric car and someone puts their foot down. It just feels, I think, really horrible. Whereas this has the natural sound of the speed as it increases. You hear the engine. Yes, you can have obviously augmented sound from speakers in electric cars to sort of mimic it, but I think your mind knows the difference and can tell the difference between a real engine and a synthesized sound of a computer system. And I truly believe that there is still life left in combustion engine cars. I think there's still a use case for combustion engine cars like this beautiful Turbo, and even if their life is going to be put to a halt in terms of new cars, I think a lot of people are still going to want to get the most out of these fantastic engines and fantastic engine cars like this beautiful Macan Turbo for as long as possible. And I think this makes a perfect pairing with something like a 911 Cayman or Boxster in your garage as the sort of everyday, more practical Porsche that all the Macans handle exceptionally well. I specialise in typically the 2.9 and 3 litres, so that's the S, the GTS and the turbos. And we've met some great people who sort of need sort of the everyday practicality of 4 seats and a big boot, but still want to get their Porsche thrills, feel the pride of having a Porsche key and a Porsche that they own. The seating position is also exceptionally good for an SUV, sport utility vehicle. You feel like it's more like a sports car in how you sit, so you do sit quite low in the car. You sit at a nice angle to the steering wheel and the pedals. It doesn't feel all flawed like you're sitting on top of everything like in a bus or something, or a camper van. It does make you feel like you're driving a high performance vehicle, because you've got the right seating position to do that. And yet you've also got pretty good visibility. The wing mirrors give you lots of view out the back. You've obviously got that rear window which you can see very clearly through, and I think a big plus to always look for in one of these is the pano roof. And yes, they can spring leaks, but that's actually not actually down to the roof mechanism itself. It's down to the drainage routing system at the back of the panoramic roof, and there are fixes for that, because basically it starts to back up all the way through and up from the bottom, so you can actually remove the sort of drain plugs that are in the bottom of those drainage things just in the rear bumper area. And there's lots of videos of that. At some point I will record a video showing people how to check their PASM roof system for it not correctly draining through. It's only really affects them, I think, in heavy rain when they're parked outside. I haven't had any issues with them, but some of the ones I've sold in the past have had their drains cleared by Porsche and by Porsche Specialist, and one of them did actually have water ingress in the past that had actually caused issues with the Bose amplifier that was in that car, and also, funny enough, the switchable sports exhaust valve on one side had needed replacing at the same time. So that's one thing to bear in mind when you're looking at a pano roof one, is to make sure that everything is working as it should, that the drains are clear, and make sure that whoever's selling it has checked that they're flowing nicely. But the benefit of having that extra light in here is just, night and day in terms of the feel, particularly in the back of the car. And I think I say it pretty much in every video, that it makes such a difference when you've got more view of the environment when you're in the back of a car. I personally, when I was younger, used to suffer from car sickness on a long journey. This would have been a massive help if I'd have had this as a passenger in the back on a journey, because I think if you see more of what's going on, then you don't feel that sort of detachment from the world around you, and then you sort of start to feel a bit queasy. I think the pano roof and everything sort of eradicates that quite nicely. But I mean, the 95B.2 I think is sort of a sweet spot. I like the fact that they have buttons like this Turbo does in the middle here. It's got the nice size PDK selector here. It's got the full size sat-nav system, the 10.9 inch HD screen there, which works effortlessly with wireless CarPlay. So I've got CarPlay running at the moment. And then you've also got that beautiful light bar at the back. Now, that alone, I think, is a really sort of signature style piece that really sort of enhanced the look at the rear of the 95B.2. And then you've also got the added benefit of this Turbo having the sport design package. So it has these enhanced mirrors which have the sort of two-armed mounting system, and you've got the sport design front and rear bumpers, and then all of the plastics have been specced on the outside in gloss black. There were two options in terms of if you wanted mounting systems on the outside, so you could have the roof rails, which a lot do, and in this case they would have probably been gloss black, but this car had them deleted from the factory, and instead someone specced the lower parts of the doors with the side steps, which again, it's not a super high car, but if you've got young kids, or if you've got people who struggle to get in and out of higher cars, then it's perfect, because you can just sort of step on those side steps, which are stainless steel and rubber, and you can get in, and they're quite a nice feature. And actually the lines of this car look a bit cleaner than other Macans who've got the roof rails, because it has that uninterrupted colour of the roof without the break of the ridges of the roof rails. But again, there's personal preference takes priority, I think. Some people would have deliberately specced the roof rails because they wanted to have possibly a roof box or bikes on the top, but again, it's so high in terms of where the roof is that you would struggle to get things in, I think. I much prefer sort of, if you've got bikes, to actually get some sort of mounting system on the back, either through a tow bar system or something else. And there are options for all those different ways of mounting things out there now, even not Porsche systems as well. But even I'm on a very, very bumpy road now. Hopefully the sound is good. I've got hopefully my mic all connected up nicely, so it's not crashing and banging and you can still hear the engine. So I'm just going to open up the windows and let's see how it sounds on these slightly slower roads. I'll put it in Sport Plus. I'll put it in manual mode, so you slide it across to go to manual mode in the 7-speed box. And you hear it, hopefully you can hear it burbling. It just feels so good. It's got such a nice tune to it. It isn't super loud. It just sounds like it's got real purpose. And actually, interestingly, with this being an engine that's shared with the RS4 and the RS5, I think, it does mean that there are tunes out there, so tuners who can put a map on these without any other engine modification to very comfortably add, I think, another 100 horsepower or so, and up to around, I think, 150 foot-pounds of torque. Might even be more than that, to make it even more ferocious. But I think Porsche have picked the right balance of drivability and non-intimidation in how much power they've given this car. And I think that's the great thing about Porsche, is they know how to balance performance with comfort and basically intimidation. It doesn't intimidate you. Yes, the original 911 turbos of the 70s were known as Widowmakers because they were rear-wheel drive. The turbos would come on and they would surprise people and you'd end up backwards in a hedge. With the more modern turbos, they give you all of that sort of surge and excitement of power without feeling like you're on your own. It's going to deliver that. It's going to work with you, not necessarily against you, and catch you by surprise. And that's why I like the turbos, because for me, it's not just how they drive, how they feel behind the wheel, but also the fact that it is a great brand. The Turbo name is, I think to a lot of people, it means something in terms of Porsches. I know it's confusing that basically all Macans have turbos, but the Turbo name was always reserved for the highest performance road car. And I think with the Macans of this era, the Turbo very much is the flagship and feels like the flagship. It feels like the highest quality product in terms of delivering performance and power while still maintaining that comfort level and that practicality that you would expect from a sport utility vehicle from, I think, one of the best manufacturers in the world. Now, you might have other opinions. Happy to hear what you think about Macan Turbos versus the GTSs versus the S, and even the base model. Because they could all be spec'd with all the equipment on a turbo. Obviously the engines are then different, but even the brakes. So the brakes actually are the Porsche coated brakes, and from my experience they're actually very, very good, but I haven't noticed any issues with the steel setup that you get with a GTS or an S. So I haven't driven them to the sort of extreme nature where you might need a surface coated discs. But one of the benefits of these surface coated discs is that you don't get basically any brake dust, which is a big help when you are cleaning the car, but it's not the end of the world. But in summary, if you do have any comments about the Macan range, what your favourites are and what eras you prefer, please don't hesitate to comment below. Please do like and subscribe, and thank you for watching this video about the beautiful Macan Turbo.